Welcome to What the Flick, everybody. Ben and Alonso here. Episode 1 of American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson. I loved this, man.
Really?
You didn't like it?
I'm holding out to see how it goes. I'm finding it a little SNL at times.
Yeah, well, that's our executive producer Amir said he had moments like that too. I didn't find him. I was into it. Now I was super into this. I was working in journalism.
Okay.
It was a big deal at the time. I remember on June 12th, I was working in Charleston, South Carolina the whole time. I interviewed O.J. Simpson, by the way, during this time. And right after the acquittal. Right, I was the second person to do an interview with him. And then it turned out, here's how you get an interview with O.J. Simpson. You asked him. But at the time, it felt like, holy crap, we got O.J. Simpson. And then anyway, because we were just this little station in Charleston. But on June 12th, 1994, I was at my desk and an alert came on those old computers, AP News Alert. O.J. Simpson's wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, her ex-wife, murdered. And, I grew up with my brother was a TV reporter and understanding cops and crime a little bit to some extent. And I was like, oh, wow, O.J. Simpson killed his wife. That's like and then shortly thereafter, O.J. Simpson was in Chicago at the time. And I was like, thank God O.J. Simpson didn't kill his wife. So it was a big story. So maybe that's what. But I don't know. I thought they found great drama in this.
I mean, I was not working in journalism, but I think I was in America. So I don't know. There's stuff here that sort of calls to mind the Ryan Murphy-isms that drive me nuts. Especially, and it's something that's sort of based on fact. It's like the way that characters introduce themselves. I'm Mark Furman. I don't know. Some of those kind of clanged for me. They didn't feel organic, and then like Schwimmer with the hair and everything. It's like not in Kimmy's room. I mean, it just I was like, calm down, everybody.
I love not in Kimmy's room. I loved it. Now I want to know if that's true.
Well, yeah, exactly. Who even knows? And as much as I love Sarah Paulson, I can't look at her without thinking of Tina Fey doing a Marcia Clark-ish character on Kimmy Schmidt.
Right.
So there's a level of absurdity here, but I think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that there's an intentional level of absurdity here because this, if you want to call a court case a circus, this is the kind of case you do it with, with the famous people and I will give them at least credit. I mean, it's written by Alexander and Karaszewski. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. Who did Ed Wood and Big Eyes and People versus Larry Flint. They're your go-tos if you want to talk about sort of absurd true life stuff, and they do start with the LA riots. Like that's the first thing we see when this thing starts, which is the context in which everything else happened.
Totally. And we get a little. I really liked it. So we definitely we saw something different. But I hear you. There was a circus-like quality to it. There was a farce-like quality to it. But the whole thing felt farce-like. I only had trouble with one scene that felt introductory or fake, and that was the Johnny Cocker and Chris Darden conversation. That felt like they've had this conversation before. This is they're catching us up a bit too much. But to hear Cochran talk about an unarmed or a ungunned black suspect being shot in the back by a bunch of cops. Again in 1994, when we as a country, because there wasn't video, were like, oh, well, she must have charged at him. Right. And now we see it in that context. We hear Cochran say it and we think, wow, they almost certainly didn't have to shoot that woman.
Right. But again, I think it's presented dramatically here as one of those like introductory statements of purpose, where a character walks out and tells you their name and tells you everything they're about. And it's like it's like when you watch a pilot. We talked about this with Billions. There's a lot of like, here's who I am and how I'm going to behave for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, maybe that'll just
once everybody's introduced,
right, we haven't met only briefly. Little Faye Resnick. I'm sure we're gonna have some fun with Connie Britton as Faye Resnick later. But I found great drama in it, and I found I thought Cuba Gooding Jr. did a really nice job of getting O.J.'s the two sides of him, that sort of panicked rage of being the thought of being caged, and then they got all the things about him, the good guy part, and the way that I went to a barbecue at his house. What are you talking about? Great guy.
I love Travolta's performance, for instance, as Robert Shapiro,
yeah, really good.
but he looks ridiculous.
He does, but Robert Shapiro looked ridiculous.
I know.
Johnny Cochran to Robert Shapiro. I mean, that's the great thing about Cochran is that now you go back and I see. I thought Johnny Cochran was a joke, a narcissistic, self-involved, incredibly smart and talented lawyer. That's obvious. Joke. Now I sort of see him as a narcissistic joke who was an important civil rights icon. I mean, he did things that mattered. He was right.
Sure.
It turns out he was on the right side. Not of this case in particular,
but of history.
But of history, right?
I just keep waiting for what the hell is Lance Ito going to be like in this? I don't even know.
It's not going to go. It's not going to go well for Lance Ito. But to have Cochran, that. When he's doing the CNN interview that day, he's like, "Oh, find the black guy," right? And then and would you be interested in that case? And I'm sure, as we know, he said it. This is a loser, because it's so obvious that he did it. And now, and I'm a little embarrassed. I mean, I did not misbehave. I did not say anything terrible. But I was certain that he did it. The evidence was in the top 0.1% of evidence that you get at a case.
He did lose the civil case. Let's not forget.
He did lose the civil case, right? And you see the mistakes that the prosecution made were staggering. But you see that not one time in that conversation between Bruce Greenwood as Gil Garcetti and Marcia Clark and Bill Hodgman and all the prosecutors. In this first episode, they never talked about race. I mean, 2 years after the riots, they still didn't in any way understand. And it's also why then when jury selection comes, and I'm sure we'll get to this, their expert told them no black women on this jury, or as few black women as possible. And they just ignored it. And you know how many black women were on the OJ jury?
How many?
8.
Wow.
8. And their expert said,
none.
Wary of black women. So they just didn't take race seriously as an issue. They didn't understand what was happening in their city, and I love that the show is giving us, right from the start, giving us that context.
Do you think the show is going to ride a line that is going to try to accommodate people who think OJ did it and people who think he didn't do it, or do you think they're pretty much just going to completely operate under the notion that, he totally did it?
Well, I don't know. I don't think reasonable people can disagree on whether he did it. You can disagree over whether black reaction in Los Angeles. You can come to understand that black reaction in Los Angeles was merely celebratory of, yeah, okay, I got it. I don't care. He may have done it. But somebody finally beat the cops. And the cops have framed us and hunted us down and put away guys who didn't do it and killed people who were unarmed. So we get to win one time. And of course, the reason they win one time is because this was a guy
He was a beloved celebrity.
And money and connected, which is how you win any case.
Which weirdly kind of ties in, I think, to the Oscars so white discussion, which I think is an important discussion to be having.
Right.
But it starts at the level of what movies get made and who gets hired to make them and who gets hired to be in them. And the Oscars are sort of the end of that,
it's
conveyor belt.
It's the wrong, right. In a sense, it's the wrong bad guy.
I mean, but it's the one that people will talk about.
Right,
the one that people care about, and it's the one that you can at least sort of make some practical steps as far as figuring out who's in the Academy. But it's systemic, having to do with something that happened, way earlier in the process.
Yeah, I mean, you see you look at a movie, again, it's not a true story, but it's like a true story. I mean, L.A. Confidential was framing of black defendants.
Right.
It's inconceivable because of what they said in the beginning. OJ and cops, they were buddies. They hung out. They had pool parties. Nobody goes to that house and thinks to plant the blood.
Right.
So they suggested that the blood was tainted. Well, again, it defies any sense of normalcy, any sense of a normal conjecture, anything it does not make any sense that they would frame O.J. Simpson for this murder. It would be a thing where they could connect and O.J. would help them find the killer. That'd be great. It's the opposite of how they would behave. But it was just, again, it was a normal crime of passion. And now, Cuba Gooding Jr. suggests, and it will be interesting, we'll find out, maybe many years from now, that he thinks O.J. has CTE.
Well, that was the concussion guy was just saying.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
That was in the news this morning. And it'll be. I want to see if episode 2 takes us inside the Bronco. That'll be interesting. And if David Schwimmer stops saying juice, I think I'm more on board with this thing.
If they all called him juice all the time, it's ridiculous. So ridiculous. So ridiculous. I had a little problem with Malcolm Jamal Warner because I still think Theo. It's not Al Cowlings. But anyway,
Selma Blair as Kris Kardashian. That was.
I didn't even get that.
Tons more of her, please.
Chloe, stop running.
Yeah, I know. It's like, okay, I'm hoping that's between that and the Kimmy's room. Like that's okay. We're good. We get it. We know that this is the Kardashian baby's origin story. But like, let's not make it a central focus, please.
I mean, real quick, Shapiro and Kardashian. They are such freaky-looking dudes, but they were pretty freaky-looking. I watched The Verdict again last night, and Robert Kardashian's, Johnny Cochran pumps his fist, OJ drops his head. I think Shapiro is pleased. I don't remember his, but Kardashian has a look of, what have I done? What have I done? Anyway, I loved it. I hope you eventually join me.
I'm committed to seeing this thing through.
All right. Thanks everybody. Back for episode 2 next week.